Thank you, John, and thank you to the League for holding this forum and for inviting us to participate. I'd like to take a few moments and address why I am opposed to the 4 charter amendments that are on the ballot. First and foremost, each of the 4 questions that will be before the public involve a large number of complex changes to the entire petition process. First and foremost, as John has mentioned, are changes to the formulas used to calculate how many signatures will be required for a petition and what time frame in which they must be collected. As John did point out, Los Alamos, well, first, as John pointed out, these formulas are generally based on the participation in municipal elections. And that Los Alamos, unlike other communities, holds its municipal elections at the same time as a general election. Other communities hold separate municipal elections. Consequently, the voter turnout in Los Alamos is considerably higher than in other places. And yes, it is knowable as to how high it is. What one has to do is contact the clerks of the various other communities and simply inquire as to what the voter participation rates are like in their elections. I have done this. In Los Alamos, a typical average election participation rate about 75%. I polled about 8 other communities here in Mexico, and the result was the highest of those other 8 communities was only 25%. Sometimes it was down as low as 10%. This therefore introduces a very large discrepancy between Los Alamos and the other communities. To carry that a little further, let's consider a few comparisons. Currently, right now in Albuquerque, there is on the ballot, or will be on the ballot, an initiative on the minimum wage. That initiative required 12,000 signatures to be collected. Albuquerque has 27 times more voters than Los Alamos does. It also allows only 1/3 as much time to collect the signatures. So to get what would be the corresponding number in Los Alamos, we would take the 12,000 and divide it by 9. You get something around 1,300, 1,350 signatures. Under the current rule, in Los Alamos, you need either 1,300 signatures or about 1,600 signatures, depending on which election is used. If the new formula is adopted, then you would not divide by 9, you'd have to divide by 18, because the time period in which Los Alamos citizens would be allowed to gather the signatures would be cut in half. And so an equivalent number of signatures in Los Alamos would be somewhere around 600 to 700, which is a lot lower than it currently is. So introducing the new change that they're proposing would make Los Alamos substantially more difficult than Albuquerque it is to collect signatures for an initiative petition. If we take a look at the recall and compare with Santa Fe, the proposed change to the Los Alamos County Charter would give us the same formula as Santa Fe does. But Santa Fe only has 25% voter participation compared with our 75%. Consequently, you need about 3 times as many signatures to institute a recall election in Los Alamos as you would in Santa Fe, despite the fact that each district within Santa Fe is about the same size and population of voters as Los Alamos. So again, you would end up in Los Alamos with rules that are much more difficult, much higher thresholds than you would anywhere else. With regard to the addition of new subjects, a number are carried over from the previous charter, indeed, and some new ones are added. However, there is a question as to how to interpret those new topics. For instance, one of the things that is added is the amendments to a zoning map. Now, A specific amendment to change spot A to spot B would be an administrative change, and that would be precluded, as John has explained. However, one could also interpret the way that it's being added as to include any legislation that discusses how zoning map amendments are to be changed. That is more of a legislative issue. Now, I picked the zoning map amendments because about 5 or 6 years ago, down in Hobbs, New Mexico, a referendum was held on their zoning ordinance. All 100 pages was put up for a up or down vote by the citizens because some citizens went out and collected a sufficient number of signatures to happen. Ultimately, the measure was approved that the referendum failed, so the ordinance did go into effect. There are a number of other small changes that are being introduced in here, and I'd like to take a few minutes to elucidate them. First of all, our current charter allows for a grace period following the initial period for collecting signatures. The reason for this grace period is to allow the county clerk to catch up on counting the signatures to figure out where we are, and then if not enough signatures have been collected, the petitioner is given 10 more days to try and close the gap. The proposed amendments would eliminate this grace period from each of the process. This has some complications because what they try to introduce in its stead is that the county clerk is supposed to report periodically on the progress of validating the signatures. However, if the county clerk should fall behind, and that can happen during a busy time, if you're collecting signatures, say, around now, while there's an election being prepared for, the petitioner is left with no recourse. The original grace period is superior in that it gives the county clerk the time to get the job done, and then the clock on the grace period only starts after the county clerk has been able to catch up. Another change that's included in these amendments is that the specifications for the time periods at which to hold the elections are removed. So the petitioners and even the people in the county government are left trying to sort through state law to figure out when an election can be held. When currently we actually specify in the charter that an election should be held within so many days after the certification. There also is introduced a new rule for initiatives that prohibits failed petitions for 1 year. Now that, on the surface, seems like a good idea, that if a petition fails to get enough signatures, that you should have to take a time off before trying again. However, if, say, in the first few days of a petition, a flaw is discovered, it's not possible then to stop the old petition and start a new one. The clerk would be prohibited from issuing a new petition based on the wording that's in the new proposed amendments. Another change on referendums is that in the current charter, referendums are allowed not only on ordinances or the whole ordinances, but on parts of ordinances as well as resolutions. These latter two are eliminated in the new proposals. Finally, we come to the final question of the four, the question on charter amendments. This is a particularly confusing question in that it attempts to lock the process of charter amending the charter to that of conducting an initiative petition. However, voters will be confronted with the question of what is going to be the process for an initiative petition. Well, they won't know at the time they're voting because that's the subject of the first question, and so it will depend on the result there. Also contained within the same question is the new rule about single subjects. And on the one hand, it's actually a very nice rule in that instead of saying that questions that are found to have multiple subjects are automatically discarded, it instead allows them to be separated and then still put to the voters. However, the question comes, Who is going to do that separating, and who gets to decide whether or not it's multiple subjects or not? It's left very unclear for the voter to have to guess how that is going to work. And it seems a little strange to add this brand new rule about single subjects tied in with this changes in the rules in the way of charter amendment. So if I take a look at these proposals from another viewpoint, I ask myself, what does the average voter get if they were to adopt all of these? Personally, I don't see much of a benefit to the average voter. What I do see as a result is a county council that is further removed, further isolated, further insulated from the input of the citizens that it represents. Back in 1967, there was a proposed charter put to the voters, and it had tougher rules for initiative, referendum, and recall. It was defeated by the voters, and a new charter with these current rules was put out in 1968. I hope that we will continue with what we have currently. I can speak from personal experience that we have a large, high requirements as it stands right now. We don't need to make them astronomical. And as one more point in my discussions with the city clerk of Santa Fe, I asked, has anybody ever done a petition in Santa Fe? The answer is no. So I don't think we want to make our requirements even higher than what they have in Santa Fe. Thank you very much.
Other questions for the well, if you
I
ask
won't
a
need
question,
that.
we'll ask